Hi, I'm Nicole, COO at OnTheClock.com, and thank you for checking out this video. Today's topic is all about how long does it take to manually calculate a time card. If you're interested, there is an article with full details that corresponds to this video, and the link to that is in the description below. I highly recommend you check it out, but let's jump right in with your answer. So it takes 5 minutes and 16 seconds on average, according to our study, or 5.27 minutes to calculate a time card manually. But that is not the only thing you need to take away from this. We learned by doing this complete study, from unboxing to setup to punching to totaling the time cards, 5 major things that we'd like to share with you, along with some other useful insights. So why did we want to do this? How did this even come about? We were talking as a team in our conference room one day about our competitors, and it occurred to us that we have a ton of customers who come from manual punch clocks or who are using them or using spreadsheets, paper of some sort, and we really knew nothing about the manual process. So a couple of our employees had used the manual punch clocks a few years ago in previous jobs, but when it comes down to the function, we really didn't know. We couldn't speak on the accuracy for sure, the prevention of time theft, accountability, any of those things. So our goals were to understand the time it takes for someone to total the time cards, to understand the pain points, the accuracy and function, to learn how the setup and unboxing works and how it compares to online time clocks to get up and running, to assist our team in truly understanding our competition, and finally, to use this as a benchmark or a template to study other time tracking methods. So as far as the details go in our method, we decided to do setup with 2 people, and we went through that at 8:30 in the morning, and we had several observations along the way that we're going to get into later. But punching, so when we decided to test it, we did this in 2 waves. And first, we had 7 employees simulate 1 week with punches. So they did the in punch, the out punch for lunch, back in after lunch, and then leaving for the day. And our second wave did the similar thing. However, they spread it out over an actual week. So whereas first wave was simulated, where we actually pushed the lever and made the time go, so the whole punch process was over the course of 2 hours. So when it comes to the insights from actually doing the punching and the setup and all of that, the noise was one of the biggest ones. We plugged it in and it made a loud, obnoxious click on every minute. And employees in the area actually had to shut doors to be able to block it out. Changing the time. So you have to actually unplug the machine to set the time. And when you do, you actually sit there and pump it in 5 minutes at a time with a lever. And we must have the upgraded version, because if you don't have that version, you actually have to plug the clock in according to the instructions and wait for it to get to the correct time. So it's not really efficient if you're really trying to get your setup up and running quickly. AM versus PM. So not the easiest thing to figure out at first, but you will notice that PM is an underscore. So that's how you tell the difference between those two, between AM and PM. Setting up the employees, we added the employee names to each of our 11 time cards, which is something that you would have to do each week or each pay period, or however it's going to work. You know, if somebody gets a time card wet or it gets lost, something like that. So it's going to be pretty constant. And then after all those insights and all that setup was ready to go, it had taken us 14 minutes to do the time from plugging it in to being ready to punch. Unboxing was just a few minutes on top of that. So in total, we were ready to go in under 20 minutes. And then one other side note is inventory needs. We were starting to punch and we were thinking, somebody has to stay on top of the time card inventory and ink so that you don't end up with like weeks of no punches or records. So now that punching is done, we moved on to totaling the time cards. And in order to do that, we distributed the 11 time cards to 5 employees and asked that they total the hours for each employee and time themselves doing so. So 2 of our employees actually totaled just 3 time cards just to get the experience and to get some more insights going in there. And we noted of all the 7 employees who were totaling the time cards, everyone had a different approach. It was crazy. You would just think, okay, total the time cards, no big deal, but everyone was different. And it is worth noting that one of our employees is a former business owner who used to do this on a regular basis. And number 3, they reported their notes on paper and via spreadsheet, and their overall feedback is in our insight section, which we're going to go through in a little bit. So to be totally transparent, we are a time tracking business, but we treated this as though we were not. And we really tried to pull out all bias, but it is worth noting there are some limitations. So one being the number of time cards. There were 11 time cards or 11 employees in the study for 1 week. So that does represent a typical small business, but it is a relatively short time frame. And going back to time frame, the length of time. So we simulated a week, and therefore that may have helped us in avoiding errors in punching. but there were still some time card edits to be made even so. The next is that we're not actually payroll employees by trade, and we know that. But over time, we do expect that if you are, the conversion of times will speed up significantly, as we think that when you work a typical schedule, you're going to just kind of know those conversions off the top of your head. The number of shifts is another limitation. Multiple shifts would have added a layer of complexity that we just didn't have. Controlled environment is another one. We were in a controlled environment. We were in a conference room doing this. So if people were rushing to punch simultaneously, we do conclude that punch times would be less neat and more of a challenge to decipher, most likely. And the last one, but not least, potential bias. So again, we are employees of a time tracking business, and we don't regularly run payroll ourselves. So we did attempt this experiment, though, as though we were payroll managers who do not work for a time tracking company, in order to remove as much bias as possible. So now comes the time to talk about our actual insights from totaling the time cards. So after we went through all of that, did all of the math, all of the calculating, all of the comparison, we had a number of insights. So Chris stated that he would be very concerned about the accuracy of his pay if this were, something that was happening at his work, to the point where calculating by hand only almost seemed like it would be against the law to him. Like there would be a law in place that you have to have some sort of digital or online type of time tracking system. Tim stated, I would pull my hair out if I had to do this every week. It's very time consuming, and I see why many opt to just round up hours to make it easier to calculate. He can see why there's so many errors are made from the confusion when a punch is not clearly on one day or another. He's not a fan. He said it would be a full-time job for a company with a good amount of employees, but he felt it was very prone to errors and mistakes. And John mentioned the readability and clarity was his biggest issue. The time card punches had ink smears in some cases. The punches were mixed up. He said he would hate to take the job of manually calculating an entire workforce because he would surely have errors in someone's pay. So once he got through the first time card, he started to get the hang of it, but he couldn't see himself doing any more than 3 manually per pay period. Dean noted that it was slow, tedious, and error-prone due to poor text alignment and overlapping timestamps. He's not comfortable with the method. He had to take some guesses on some, and he's not comfortable with the 2 tools that he had found to be 100% confident in their level of accuracy. And Bryn noted that she had her doubts that she calculated the employees' time cards correctly simply because of the fact that I had a hard time telling numbers apart from one another because of the excess ink. So if you do note in our very top of the article, if you happen to be following along, there is an image that is an actual image from our time card that reflects this frustration with the ink. But aside from the fact that poor judgment calls could be made when trying to calculate, she felt it was very time consuming. And then for me, my own feedback is that I had noticed I had errors when I was comparing my times to the online time clock. And it took me 20 minutes to go through each error and figure out what had happened. That turned this whole process into hours just for one pay period. So now we get to the good part. These are the 5 top things that are really important for you to know when you're calculating time cards manually. So number 1 is the time it takes to calculate that total time. So we had asked 7 of our team members to total the time cards while they timed themselves with each one. We ended up with 39 totals, averaging 5 minutes and 16 seconds each, or 5.27 minutes each, like we said at the beginning of this video. We did remove the first time card calculated by each member so that when we got that number of 39 to simulate a realistic scenario, with the manager being familiar with the process, it would be a little bit more realistic. We didn't want to include that very first one because that really wouldn't be quite realistic. You would have some familiarity most likely with the process if you were a manager doing this. So something to think about. If you had 20 time cards to total each week, that would take you 105 minutes, which is almost 2 hours for that task, simply that task. That does not include having to go back and ask someone what a punch time should be because it was left blank or smudged or switched around, something like that. So again, if you're following along, there is a really handy chart that would kind of give you an idea where if you're doing this manually based on your employee count, where you might fall. So for example, if you had 40 employees, you'd be at like 3.5 hours per week or pay period, whatever it is, every time you have to total these. Number 2, error rates are high. So I'm not going to say this is everyone's error rate, but this is a real life situation that we were, purposely trying to measure this. And our error rate came in at 75%. That means just 25% of our times were accurate. And in order to verify accuracy, we did plug in these time card totals into an online time clock. And we also went to a competitor online time clock and we triple checked these to make sure that these were absolutely the totals that it should be. And I can say the primary issue was in converting. So myself personally, I did a lot of inversions with numbers because it was really a challenge to look, back and forth, trying to look between a conversion chart and my, handwritten notes, even when I put it in Excel. But we found that most often the issue was that that type of thing. But the other is that the Green Machine in particular gives you a conversion chart. But with that conversion chart, it's rounded to 2 digits. And if you really want to be accurate, you need to be 3 digits. So the online type of systems were more accurate. And if you were using that conversion chart, you will find that you were like 0.01 to 0.02 off, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but you don't want to be putting or planting seeds in your employees' heads that things might not be quite accurate. So according to the Workforce Institute, there are 82 million Americans who have dealt with inaccuracies in time and pay at some point. So number 3, there are a variety of methods and assumptions made in calculations. So as mentioned, each person took a different approach to total the time cards. Some went to a spreadsheet, some went to free tools online, did some Google searching, some were using conversion chart, did it on paper. But what we found is that no manual method provided 100% accuracy when comparing those values to an online system. So it speaks volumes to the benefit of an employee being able to simply just punch in and out and have no middleman and no room for error or interpretation. Number 4, the tools provided by the manufacturer we felt were ineffective. So the time clock that we used came with a conversion chart. And to be completely transparent, I deal with numbers all the time in spreadsheets and have for over 15 years, but I did the calculations incorrectly with the conversions because there's no instructions. So the other major issue is that the decimals are rounded to 2 places, like we had mentioned. And so we tested this a bunch, and we did put a sample time card in the article to show you that when you round to 2 digits, compared to 3, that's where you're going to get that 0.01 to 0.02 off. And again, it's not a lot, but you don't want your employees questioning that. So number 5 is the legibility of times and dates is poor. So the ink smeared on some of the time cards and some of the numbers appeared indistinguishable. The 1 and the 7 in particular were very similar. So now you leave the manager with 2 options. One, they either track down the employee and ask, but how likely is it that they're going to remember their times they punched if it's days later? Or the manager has to make the best guess as to what it should be. And we had a lot of best guesses made, which contributed to our inaccuracy rate. But again, you're building wedges with employees by making assumptions on the times that they worked. So overall, we wanted to gain a better understanding of our manual time clock competitors and just how long it takes to manually calculate time cards, and mission accomplished. It was painful, but mission accomplished. So we found it took 5.27 minutes each. There are inaccuracies, too much time being spent on figuring out totals and what went wrong, what the errors were. And we found this to be just kind of miserable for the manager doing the calculations. And, the employees might end up losing confidence in their new employer or employer if it's existing. But according to HRdive.com, just 2 payroll errors can trigger about half, it's 49% of employees to start looking for a new job. So with all that being said, if you want to try a modern time tracking system, I highly recommend you click the link in the article or in the description and sign up for that free 30-day trial at OnTheClock.com and see the difference in how accurate your time cards will be and how much time you will save. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you found something useful. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, comment if you have other tips on the whole process of manual time card calculations. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.